Always some conflict somewhere. Um, your kids, right? And even though they grow to be adults, that doesn't mean the conflict goes away. Be nice sometimes, but it could be at work, somebody at work. It could be a neighbor. I mean, there's a lot of different places that we're going to find conflicts. But I want you, number one, to remember that we live in a broken world. That's the first blank there, broken. We live in a broken world. Wouldn't it be nice if we could expect that if we did everything right, we could reach perfection? But no matter how much we try as human beings to reach perfection, there's always going to be imperfections because we have a sin nature, and that's the world we live in. And the people around us have a sin nature. So you may treat that person well, and they may be really angry at you. You're like, what happened? Well, we live in a broken world. So don't forget that. There's the key, though, and that's why I put a little key in the notes section there. Number 2, God uses people to mature us and to refine us. I remind myself often that God puts the right people in my life to mold me into the image of Jesus Christ. Now, I don't like them being there because they make life hard. And it could be, again, it could be children, it could be a coworker, it could be a neighbor. Hopefully it's not your spouse, but it could be your spouse, I suppose. That person is not there because God hates you and he wants you to suffer. That person is there. And by the way, I'm talking about irritating people. I mean, there's a lot of people in my life I get along with great. I love you all. But every once in a while, there's that person that just irritates me. Why, Lord? And the Lord says, because I want to conform you to the image of Jesus Christ. I want to grow you up, Scott. I want to make you a better Christian, right? And that leads me to number 3. God is more interested in our character than in our comfort. We say this a lot because it's true. God is more interested in our character than our comfort. I don't think this is true of this group here, but I'm sure on Sunday mornings there's a lot of people come and what they really want is they want to be made comfortable, right? They want life to be easier. And they're hoping or they're seeing, thinking, if I come to church and I join these people, that my life will get easier. But God is not interested in making our life easy. He's interested in making us like Jesus Christ. So if you're looking for a place to just be comfortable, the center of God's will is not necessarily the most comfortable place to be. It's always the safest place to be. It's always the best place to be. Don't misunderstand me. But it's not always comfortable. So keep that in mind as we go through this about personal conflict, that sometimes God puts us in a spot we're not comfortable. He brings an irritating person into our life, and it's there to build us up, to make us better Christians, to make us more like Jesus Christ. Okay, that second main point, personal conflict, people and places. Where are some of the places that we might expect personal conflict? Well, the first one there is home and family. Home and family. Now, again, I hope that your spouse is not the person that drives you crazy. Sometimes that's true. And if that's your situation, I'd be glad to sit down with you and we can talk through some of these things and give you some more clear advice. Although some of the advice, some of what we're going to talk about tonight will be a help to you. I'm thinking more of your children, especially if you have children in the home, or you have adult children who you have regular contact with. I have regular contact with my adult children. And it doesn't matter that they're older, right? It doesn't matter that they're adults. Connie, you've had adult children for a long time. They still do things that irritate. And they're not even always trying to, although sometimes I'm convinced they're trying to. And little children, of course, foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. And I want to encourage you tonight because God puts those children in our lives because he knows that's what we need to be more like Jesus Christ. God gave me 4 children. I love every one of them. They're very different. They treat me differently, and so, I treat them differently as far as according to their personality. And sometimes I say, why did you give me that one, Lord? And he says, here, because I knew that's what you needed, Scott, to be more like my son, Jesus Christ. So it's not a penalty. I'm wary of people that will tell you, if you do everything right, your kids are going to turn out great. You can do a lot of right things and your kids still have trouble because God's in control and people have a chance to respond to him. And so home and family is one place. Church and Christians. Think with me about the book of Acts. How long did it take before there was conflict in the church in Jerusalem? Do you remember that story? How long did it take before there was conflict in the church in Jerusalem? Let's go to Acts chapter 6. Okay, so in chapter 2, we have 3,000 people saved in the day of Pentecost. Chapters 3 and 4 talk a lot about John and Peter go to the temple. There's that man who's lame from birth. They heal him, and that causes all kinds of trouble with the local authorities who don't want them talking about Jesus. And, of course, they're going to talk about Jesus. And then chapter 5, of course, starts with the story of Ananias and Sapphira. We're going to skip over that. Go to chapter 6, verse 1. Acts chapter 6, verse 1. And in those days. So I don't know the exact timeline, but I'm thinking it's within the first year of this new church, right? It's not years and years down the road. It's still when this church is new and fresh and people are excited and, boy, they're recently saved and God is so good. But look at chapter 6, verse 1. And in those days, when the number of the disciples was multiplied, there arose a murmuring of the Grecians against the Hebrews because their widows were neglected in the daily ministration. What was going on in this church was the church had dedicated itself to provide for the widows that were in the church, which is a good thing a church ought to do. But there came a dispute because the Grecians, this would be the Greek-speaking Jewish widows, said, wait a minute, the Hebrew-speaking Jewish widows are getting more attention than we're getting. And you can read the rest of the chapter for how they resolved that issue. But I just want you to notice, you've got a good church. It's a young church. They love God, but there can still be conflict. And so don't be surprised if maybe some of the people that you find irritating, some of the people you find conflict with are right here at Elmira Baptist Church. That doesn't mean you should leave the church. It means you should resolve that conflict. And again, if I can be a help, we'll talk more about this in a bit. If I can be a help, if you come to me and you say, I'm really struggling with this fellow Christian, I'm not going to yell at you or just suck it up, be a man, or in your case, be a woman, right? But I'm going to walk through it with you. We'll work it out because sometimes the conflict is right here in this church. And sometimes your conflict may be with me. That happens. Yeah, that happens. And if you come to me and you can't work it out, then grab one of our deacons and say, hey, talk to Pastor about this. We're not seeing eye to eye. Would you? Here's my encouragement to you. If you're struggling with conflict at Elmira Baptist Church, ask God for help and work it out. Don't just take off. I don't like that church. I don't fit in over there. Work through that conflict. This is how God teaches us. This is how God grows us. Here's a third place. Work and your career. You're going to have conflict at work. I think this is where it's most likely for many of us. I work here at the church, so praise the Lord. I don't experience it like you guys do, but many of you work in jobs where you have unsaved people. They don't love God. They don't care about truth and righteousness. And maybe they don't like you for some reason, whatever it is, and you've got to resolve conflict. Let me remind you that Acts chapter 5, verse 9 calls us to be peacemakers. Not to be stirrers of the pot, right? Not to be the drama person at our job, but to be peacemakers. And here's the fourth one, politics and government. Most of us are not involved in our politics, but I wish there were more peacemakers, more conflict resolution people, more reconcilers in our government. Okay, let's move on next. Prayer and preparation. If you are going to resolve conflict, again, just personal conflict in your own life, you're going to need to pray. And I'm going to give you a couple of things that I would like you to pray about. But let's open our Bibles and go to James chapter 1, verse 5. James chapter 1, verse 5. I'm going to ask AJ to read James 1:5. And then someone other than AJ, paying attention, tell me what we should pray for according to James 1:5. So AJ, when you find that, if you'd read that for us. And by the way, these are in your notes. We're now at the top of page 3. If you're saying, oh, that looks like page 2. Well, page 1 is here, right? Page 2 now at the top of page 3, and we're looking at things to pray for as we consider resolving personal conflicts. AJ, you got it. James 1:5. Okay, someone who's not AJ, what does this verse tell us to ask for? Wisdom. There you go. Put that in the blank. Pray for wisdom. I find myself praying for wisdom a lot. God, how do I deal with this child? God, how do I deal with this brother or sister in Christ? God, how do I deal with this neighbor? Father, give me wisdom about dealing with, right? We want wisdom. Don't be embarrassed to ask God for wisdom, because it says that he doesn't upbraid you. He doesn't rebuke you. He's going to give it to you generously. But ask for wisdom. We're still in James. That's number 1. Still in James. Number 2 is James chapter 4, verse 10. Guillermo, you got your Bible with you there? James 4:10. Would you read that one for us? So, what do you think is the second thing that we should pray for there? Humility. Humility. I was in Mongolia working on, and I wasn't really working. I was with a group that was working on a translation. I was not a translator, but I did provide some insight, and I met with this group. We were praying often together. At the same time we were working on a translation of the New Testament, there was another group of Christians over here that was also working on a translation of the New Testament. And this guy flew in from England who is a translation specialist, and I don't remember exactly how it all worked out, but he met with our group and he met with the other group. And I don't remember exactly all the timing, but by this time that he met with us, we'd already met with him at least once. He'd already met with the other group at least once. And of course, we're telling him the other group is wrong about this, and the other group is wrong about that, and they're not paying attention to this issue, and they don't know the language. Okay, we had all these accusations. I'm exaggerating a little for effect, but that's pretty much our attitude. And guess what he told us to pray for? He said, you guys need to pray for humility. Boy, that cuts you down quick. You know what you want to say? We don't need to be humble. Those guys. Pray for humility. Proverbs 13:10, that's the last verse there, says, only by pride cometh contention. And a lot of the conflicts we have, especially with other Christians. Now, again, that you may have some enemies at work or a neighbor who hates you because you're a Christian. I'm not talking about those issues, but many of the personal conflicts we have comes out of my pride meeting somebody else's pride. And if one of us would just humble ourselves and listen or apologize or respond with humility, the conflict would go away. But I say, no, I'm right. And my wife says, no, I'm right. And then, then we're going at it. And so pray for humility. Psalm 137, verses 23 and 24 that are also listed there encourage us to pray that God will search us and try our hearts. And when it comes to personal conflict, we almost always think that it's the other person, don't we? But it takes two people to fight. So often, not always, but often part of the conflict lies with me. And I need to get God's mind on this so I can understand what part my heart is playing in the conflict. And we'll talk about what I do with that knowledge in a minute. But I'm going to pray for wisdom. I'm going to pray for humility. And then, without even looking at the verse, Matthew 5:44, what's the third thing that we ought to pray for? Pray for the blank involved in the conflict. Yeah, pray for the people, the others involved in the conflict. You say, but they're my enemy. Well, Matthew 5:44 tells us to pray for our enemies. And so pray for that person. You'll be amazed how much God can work on your own heart and change your own heart when you start praying for that guy over there. All of a sudden, you care. All of a sudden, he's not just an enemy, he's a person. And he's got real problems, and he's got his own sets of pressures. And as you begin to really intercede for him, not just God, deal with that guy over there, but you really intercede for him, boy, it changes your own heart. Lots of stories I could tell, but I'm not going to tell stories all night. Go to 1 John chapter 5, verse 14. 1 John 5:14. Warren, I'm going to ask you to read this verse, and we'll work. Well, there's another guy back there in a second. I'll ask him. 1 John 5:14. Warren's going to read this, and then we're going to pray for something else that has two blanks. Yes. So what are we going to pray for? Someone who's not Warren. God's will. We want God's will to be accomplished. Now, think through this with me. Is it possible that God's will be accomplished in this conflict and you won't be happy? Yeah. A lot of times the reason conflict doesn't get resolved is because I'm so concerned about being right, about being vindicated, that everyone knows that I'm the pastor, I'm the father, I'm the husband, whatever, whatever it is. And if I can actually get past that and say, God, what are you trying to do here? Conflict gets resolved. So pray for God's will to be accomplished. Be prepared to surrender your own plans for how you're going to solve this conflict. Be prepared to surrender your own revenge, right? Your own desires to be right and to be shown to be the right person. Now, I also want you to get excited because when you pray according to God's will, what does this verse say happens? He hears us. He hears us. So I'm in the middle of a problem. God, you're going to have to give me wisdom. And I'm asking you to humble me, search my own heart. What part am I playing in this? Why is this conflict happening that I'm responsible for? I'm praying for this person over here. God, give them patience with me. Give them grace to deal with me. And I'm praying for that as well. And then I say, and I want your will to be done. And then here in a second, we're going to have a meeting with this. We're not even met with this person yet, right? We're going to have a meeting with this person. And boy, it just changes the whole tone. Instead of going into that meeting, I'm going to show this person I'm right. I'm going to show this person they're wrong. I'm going to be the victor here. I have a whole different attitude. Okay, God, what are you trying to accomplish? Because we know God's at work. Remember, the key is to remember that God puts irritating people in our lives to mature us and to refine us, to make us more like Jesus Christ. Suddenly, the whole conflict issue has changed, for me anyway. I'm sure it will for you. Yes, Guillermo. Sure. Psalm 34. Okay. Mm-hmm. Why don't you read those verses for us and then ask your specific question? Mm-hmm. Troubles. Mm-hmm.
So, I guess, because we know that sometimes God talks to us and wait.
Right.
Right now. So, try to, just, I believe God for it.
So let me tell you a true story. I had originally been allowed into Mongolia and to remain in Mongolia. There was two pieces to staying in Mongolia. One was residency permission, and the other was the visa. The visa actually just allows you to come and go from the country. Many countries have some way to establish residence. In America, we call it a green card, right? So I needed both aspects. And so for a long time, I had taught English as a second language or as a foreign language in Mongolia. And that wasn't working real well. And for various reasons, I wanted to change that. And my friend said, if you go down to the Foreign Investment and Foreign Trade Office, you can get a businessman's visa, businessman's residency permission. It's much easier than teaching English. And Anyway. So I said, okay. So I went down to the foreign trade and foreign investment office, and there at almost all offices in Mongolia, there would be a big plaque on one of the doors, would say General Secretary, big title, President, whatever. I don't remember what this guy's name was. And you'd meet him, and you'd tell him what you wanted, right? But the real work was done by his secretary. The woman would do the real work. This is very common in Mongolian offices. So I actually met the fella, told him, I wanted to get businessman's visa. Oh, yeah, that's great. Go see my secretary. So when I saw the secretary, and as we were having this conversation, she said, I have this daughter. She knew I had been teaching English because I told her. She asked me, and she said, I have this daughter. She's in high school or college. I forget the exact age, but older daughter. I'd like her to learn English. I said, that's great. I'd like her to learn English too. Yeah, she said, but I want you to tutor her in English. I said, well, why don't you call me and we'll set something up. Because I learned often if I just told someone else to call me, they would never call, right? And then, fine. So I said, call me. So about a year later, my American friend who told me about this investment opportunity, Mickey was his name, he came back to me. He said, oh, man, you've got to do something. I said, what are you talking about? He said, you made that secretary at the Foreign Investment and Foreign Trade Office very angry at you. I said, what are you talking? He said, she won't deal with us. She won't talk to us. We're trying to get another friend into the country on this visa, and she is angry, and it's your fault. I said, what do you mean it's my fault? He said, you said you would tutor her daughter in English, and you never did. I thought, oh, man. Number one, I hadn't agreed to tutor her daughter. I did say I would if she called. She never called me. If she would have, I would have. I did some tutoring from time to time, just, Anyway, he said, we got to make this right. He said, you're going to have to go down there and you're going to have to apologize to her. Now, I hadn't done anything wrong, you understand. That was one objection I had. But there was a second objection that was even more important than that. And that is, in Mongolian culture, you should never admit that you're wrong. I don't know if any of you are familiar with cultures like this, but if you got in a car wreck, a car accident, my friend said, never say, I'm sorry, or I did this. Just say, hey, let's call the police, right? Let them settle it. Because the second you say you're wrong, then things get so much more worse. So Mickey had not been in the country nearly as long as I had been, and I said, Mickey, you don't understand. Number one, I didn't do anything wrong. But number two, even if I go and apologize to it, it's not going to make the situation better. It's going to make it worse. And he said to me, we got to try. I said, okay. Well, if we're going to try, we're going to do a couple things. We're going to pray first, which I mentioned. Pray for wisdom, pray for humility, pray for God's will, pray for her, the lady at the fifth office. I said, number two, we're going to take a translator because I'm convinced that if I try to say it in Mongolian, it's just going to make it. Let's get a translator. Even though I can speak Mongolian, Mickey couldn't, but I could. Let's get a translator. His name was Tukso. We'll take Tukso with us, and we'll go talk to this lady. So we prayed. I think we spent about a week praying, made an appointment, went in to see this lady. And I tell you what, if looks could kill, I looked at her and I thought, I'm wasting my time. We're not going to get anywhere. Now, I might have mentioned to you earlier, in Mongolia, you never talk about a situation directly. You always have to talk for 10 or 15 minutes just about everything else, right? So my friend Tukso, he's trying to talk about everything else, the weather and whatever, and business or whatever. And this lady's just sort of glaring at me. And everyone knows that I'm there because I'm supposed to apologize to her, so I didn't fold my arms. I put my hands on the table, and I'm just, praying, Lord, you just give me grace. Just need time. When he turns to me and says, okay, Scott has something to say. Help me to know what to say. So we're going around the table, and I can understand what's being said. My friend's saying, my friend Scott here, he said he would tutor your daughter, and he didn't, and he really feels bad about that. And part of me wants to say, no, that's not what happened. I didn't say it, but I just kept my mouth shut. And he was getting ready for me to do my part about saying, I'm really sorry, would you forgive me? When this lady smiles and she says, no, it's my fault. I literally almost fell out of my seat, because remember, Mongolians never say it's my fault. She said, no, it's my fault. I was supposed to call him, and I didn't. And what I'd like him to do instead is I'd like him to teach the whole office, which was only 6 or 7 people. I'd like him to teach the whole office English instead of just my daughter. Well, that was actually a lot more comfortable. It would be much more comfortable for me to teach an entire 5 or 6 office of people than some young lady that I had never met before, right? So, all that story, Guillermo, to tell you that I think the Lord answered the prayer, right? The righteous cry, the Lord hears, and he delivers them out of their trouble. Yeah, in his time. And prayer was an important part of that. I don't think it would have gone the same way if we had not prayed. But number 2, be committed to God's will being done. Right? If it would have come to it and Tukso would have turned to me and said, okay, I would have said, forgive me. We talked about tutoring your daughter. I wouldn't have lied, but I said, we talked about tutoring your daughter. It never happened, which those things are true. I felt it was her fault, but would you forgive me, right? I would have said that because I'm trying to resolve conflict. Now, it's not always possible to resolve conflict. We're going to look at that a little bit later, but most of the time we think we can't resolve conflict, so we don't even try. And that was the time in my life when I was so sure that this was the stupidest idea on earth. To go talk to this lady. She has all the cards, right? She has all the power. I'm just a foreigner. I don't have anything. She's convinced that I've blown it. We'll just leave it. Don't deal with her, right? We'll go another way. But he said, no. Mickey said, no, we got to make this right. Okay. Does that answer your question? Cry unto the Lord. Ask him to resolve it, even if it doesn't look like it can be resolved. Yeah. Number 2, consider your own part in the conflict. Now, the reason I brought up prayer first is because if you consider your own part in the conflict without praying, you usually decide it's not your fault. Right? Not my problem. But you've already prayed for wisdom, you've prayed for humility, and you've prayed for God's will. And it's very likely that in that process, God started bringing things to your mind that you need to change. In fact, there may be some aspect of the conflict where you have sinned. You've broken. Maybe it was, I'm just telling you, this happens from time to time. I've said something harsh to my wife. Now my wife is angry at me. Guess what I need to start? I need to start with the Lord and say, God, forgive me. Shouldn't have said that harsh thing to my wife. Would you forgive me? God forgives me, but guess what I have to do second? Got to go to my wife and say, I said this harsh thing and I should never have said that. Would you forgive me? Yeah, and she forgives me. But start by confessing any known sin to the Lord. As you consider your own part in the conflict, confess any known sin that you have that God brings to your mind. Here's the second thing you're going to do. Go to Proverbs 13:10. We talked about the first half of that verse, only by pride cometh contention. Let's look at the second half of Proverbs 13:10. Alex, you got a Bible tonight? Great. When you find Proverbs 13:10, if you would read to us that verse, and then someone who's not Alex is going to guess what goes in that blank. Get something. You ready? Good. What word do you think goes there? Get counsel or get advice. Get counsel. A lot of times, now you won't use every single step in this every single time, but a lot of times I find what I need to do is I need to talk to someone else, not to gossip about the problem, but just what do you think is happening? And we're going to talk more about this in a second, what do you think is my part in it? The person I often use is my own wife, right? I'll say, hey, I'm really struggling with one of the kids, or I'm really struggling with a brother in Christ, or, this person, neighbor, whatever. And because my wife knows me really well, she often can put her finger on it. Well, have you considered that you were, I don't really want to hear that, do I? No. I want her to back me up and say, oh, yeah, you're right. Those people are wrong. But I don't need that kind of counsel. I need someone who knows the situation, knows me, and can say, hey, I think you need to consider it from the other side, which is where we're going with this. Let's look at Proverbs 21:2. Proverbs 21:2. I'm going to read this one to you. Proverbs 21:2 says this, every way of a man is right in his own eyes. Again, I'm always sure when the conflict starts, I'm always so sure that it's the other person's problem. But I want you to consider, or view, that's the word I use there, view the conflict from the other side. That's the blank there in letter C. View the conflict from the other side. If you were over here observing your actions and your words and your attitude, what would you see? Even if it's your child, we can, as parents, we can, sometimes unintentionally, sometimes carelessly, frustrate our own children. Let me give you an example. We learned with one of our 4 children that this helped all 4 of them, but one of them in particular really responded well when we said to them, hey, about 10 minutes and you need to go to bed. And then we'd say, okay, it's time to go to bed, and the child would just go to bed. But if we just popped it on, okay, time to go to bed, remember, they can't read a clock. They're too young for that. Meltdown. Oh, I don't want to go to bed. All we had to do is find a way to say, and we did this, 10 minutes, you're going to go to bed. It was like night and day different. Why not help my child that way? Does the Bible say I have to frustrate them by just popping it on them suddenly? No, Now, as a parent, can I do that? I mean, yes, I have a right to just say, okay, it's time to go to bed. I'm not saying that you can't. I'm just saying, why not help the child? And once I viewed it from the other side, I said, oh, you know what? I could do that for him. You had a question or comment. Yeah, shoe on the other foot. That's good. Yes. Right? You know what they say? They say you should always walk a mile in your enemy's shoes. Then you're a mile away and you have his shoes. Okay, that's a different story. But yes, you're right. Put the shoe on the other foot. If I'm about to approach this guy with these arguments, what is he going to perceive? How is he going to understand this? One of the things I need to remind myself is that as a pastor, people have a higher expectation of how I'm going to handle things. And whether that's fair or not is not the point. So maybe sometimes I need to humble myself. There are times I humble myself and I say, you know what? I understand that this hurt you, this bothered you, this made you mad, this whatever, please forgive me. Even though I could say as a pastor, hey, I have every right to tell you what to do and you just need to deal with it. But that doesn't help that person. We're not moving forward. And so if I consider it from their side, they're expecting their pastor to act a certain way and I didn't act quite the way they expected, I can apologize for that, right? So, yes, this is the shoe on the other foot test. View the conflict from the other side. And then we're going to end here tonight and then pick it up here next week. So hold on to your sheets. I'll bring some more of these next week. But decide what the problem is. In other words, what is the conflict? What is the source of the conflict? Because so often I have found that the biggest problem, not every time, but the biggest problem is I think the problem is this and you think the problem is that. And so I come at this as like, we got to do this and this and that. And you're like, Pastor, I have no idea what you're talking about. The problem is this, not that. And so I need to know what the problem is. And so this is, again, as I talk about getting counsel, you know, what is the problem? What is the source of the conflict? What is the underlying issue? If we can get to that underlying issue, usually with my Christian brothers and sisters, if we can get to the underlying issue, we can come to an understanding. I may have to give some, and you may have to give some. I get that. But so often, we're arguing about two different things. I should have got a good illustration of this. Maybe you have a good illustration of this, where you were arguing with someone, you thought you were arguing about one thing, and they thought you were arguing about something else. I do know this, in the medical profession, doctors, nurses are trained to start with this question. What is your chief complaint? Because you can go to the doctor and say, well, my elbow hurts, and I've been having headaches, and when I eat rice, my stomach, right, and they're going to say, whoa, stop. What's your chief complaint? And sometimes I want to overwhelm my opponent with all my problems. you do this and you do that and you never do this, and then this happens, and pretty soon this person's like deer in the headlights. What in the world is going on? When the real problem is, I'm just upset because dinner wasn't on the table when I expected it. Right? I mean, let's just deal with that issue. Here's an example. I went to get paper for the printer. I'm at home, not here at work. I'm at home. I went to get paper for the printer. I went to where I've been storing paper for the last 2 years. And the paper's not there. I know there was paper there. And you want to just get angry. Who moved the paper, right? I said to my wife, who was in a room near me, I said, Christy, do you know where the paper is? Yes, she did. Now, she didn't say she moved it. I don't know who moved it. But she knew where the paper was. And I said, Christy, yes, it's here. I've got the paper. Problem solved, right? What's my chief complaint? I need paper. Let me tell my wife that. Don't complain about, people always moving stuff in this house. There are 6 people who live in my house. So yes, things get moved a lot. I don't move them all the time. In fact, I move them less than other people because I'm usually content with things just sitting where they are. So the chief complaint is, where is the paper? I say to my wife, do you know where the paper is? She says, yes, it's over there. Problem solved. No conflict. Or I can start yelling. People are always moving stuff, and I can't find what I used to handle it this way. I can't find what I need. And then, people are offended, and I say, Caleb, did you move it? I think you must have moved it. I don't know. What's my chief complaint? I need paper. I say, I need paper. Paper appears. So let me encourage you, when it comes to these conflicts, think through, what is it that's really driving your complaint? What is it that hurts? What is it that's bothering you? And we're going to talk about this next week. Write that down. Because sometimes once you say to the other person, I'm bothered that when we talk about finances, you always accuse me of spending money recklessly, or whatever it is. I've not experienced that personally, but let's imagine that it is. Boy, you can work through that a lot easier than arguing over whether you should go to McDonald's. Don't go to McDonald's for lunch. The food is terrible. But, you understand the gist of it, whether you should go out for lunch. The real issue is whether or not you're spending money recklessly or not. The real issue is not whether you should go out to lunch or not. So think through and decide what is the real issue. And here's where getting some counsel may help. I have learned as a pastor, as I'm counseling people, usually the thing I can do for them, I can't solve their problem. I can't make the other person like them. But what I can do is help them understand what their chief complaint is. And we can pray together, and then we can take that chief complaint to the other person. And so often the Lord brings peace. Because we prayed about it. We can express, this person can express what is bothering them, and now the Lord can bring healing. Next week we'll work out on this some more here. Any other questions? I think I missed a whole section. Nope, I didn't. Okay, good. We'll get to some more next week. Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. Right. That's true. I think I would just remark that I think that's where prayer really comes in, because when the righteous do cry, the Lord hears them, and He does deliver them. Because you're right, we're not going to fight with lies, right? That's what our opponent may do. They're not a Christian. You're talking about non-Christians. They'll lie about us. They'll lie about whose fault things are. They'll say, you didn't do that, or you did do that when you weren't even involved, right? I got fired from a job one time, and they said, you have not been counting these particular items. I said, that's not even my area. But they just wanted to get rid of me, which is fine. But yeah, people will lie about you. So how are we going to respond? Well, you're right. We're not going to respond with lies or manipulation. We're just going to have to pray. But again, that lady in the FIFTA office, that foreign investment and foreign trade office, I would have never expected that to work out the way it did. And so I attribute the response to prayer, because she wasn't a Christian. She didn't owe me anything, you know. Yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I don't think I remember this story, or if you did. Right, and then he gives you a poor review at the end of the year.
Yeah, it happened because there was a meeting that he set up with 5 people,
Mm-hmm.
and it was after a merger
Mm-hmm.
that they were not happy. So they kind of brought him in. It was fun. It was just skip level.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, so at the time, I got very angry.
Right.
If it would have been in California, I would have gone to look for it. Trust
Good thing he was in Charlotte, eh?
But one of
The joys of remote work.
I was just, my point is, what the Lord did for me, because I was praying, he took me to, I think it was Ephesians, when he talks about honoring your master.
Mm-hmm.
And that spoke to my heart. I said, okay, I haven't done anything wrong.
Right.
The Lord, you want me to, so I set up a call with him. And I basically took okay, it was my fault. Tell me, what,
Mm-hmm.
put together a plan that is going to, let me what the point is,
Mm-hmm.
how do you think I need to move on?
Right.
So I came back with a plan for him,
Mm-hmm.
and then he liked it. 6 months later, he gave me an exceedance.
Yeah.
My point is that at that time, I went to God's word, and it was God's
Right.
word that actually, even though I believe like for the
Right. Warren, yeah.
but it's still, it's amazing how God's word still, like when you pray and you go to his word,
Mm-hmm.
it'll still give you that wisdom on
Mm-hmm.
how to deal with those situations.
Exactly.
If you obey, you follow.
Right. And in this case, you had to humble yourself and say, okay, give me some steps for improvement, and I'll do those. Yeah. That's an excellent example. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Hold on to these. If you don't, I'll have some more next week. They'll be the same thing, but we'll finish this up next week, resolving personal conflict. And again, if there's some unusual conflicts you're having at church or home or something that you think I can help you with, I'd be glad to just meet one-on-one and we can talk about those. Just keep in mind, I don't fix things like, here's the magic formula and everything will get better, because God puts those irritating people in our lives specifically to mold us into the image of Jesus Christ. You've got a prayer sheet here. Let me add a few things here. And one is, please pray for Patty Tomaloso. She's ill tonight. That's why she's not here with us. Patty Tomaloso is ill. Another lady that is a friend of Pam Franklin's. Her friend's name is Ann, and her last name is Venezuela, like the country. But Ann called Pam to tell Pam that she has cancer. So if you pray for Ann. There's been there's a good example. There's been some friction in that friendship. So pray that Pam would have an opportunity to mend fences with Ann. And so pray for Ann, who has cancer. Okay, those are the two that I have. Maybe you have new requests or updates for us to help us pray. I'm going to pick on Alex here. Alex, you've got some car issues. Where is that at? Those are the worst. Amen. Yeah, he and his family had gone north, Lassen National Park, to do some family time, camping and things, and their car did not start. But then you must have got it started, because eventually you got back here. Oh, it died. That's terrible. Yep. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you got 3 little kids. Yeah. Yeah. Right. I got it. I need it. Yeah. Yeah. Amen. Yeah, but he has car issues, so pray that they get those figured out. But thank the Lord too that they got back safely. Yeah. Good. Yeah, go ahead, Alex. Yeah. What is the cousin's first name? David. So pray for David's marriage. This is Adela's cousin. Yeah, we need to pray for these marriages. There's a couple others that we've been praying for, Anthony and Jasmine and Sebastian and Jessica. Keep praying for them too. Other updates, new requests? Yes. Darshan. If you get a chance to text that to me later, we'll get the name on there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So Darshan's father is having open heart surgery, and we'll try to get Darshan's father's name. I like to pray for people by name, but Darshan is Guillermo's co-worker. Anyone else? Yeah. Yeah, he was hoping to be back I asked him if he could be back this week, and he was hoping to. But yeah, he drove a U-Haul from here to Denver, unloaded it. Yeah, so that's a drive. I believe you. All right, let's go to prayer. Find someone to pray with and take some time to pray. And then, yeah. AJ and Guillermo, if I can meet with the two of you briefly after prayer. It's 2 minutes, not a big deal.